Hey, welcome back to the Lead Up Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Harbour. Really excited to be with you today. Today's is a guest interview on our Elite Leader series. And our guest is someone who's operating in one of the most complex, capitated healthcare environments in the whole country, in the whole US, and winning, by the way. Anthony Stahl is the president of White Oak Medical Center. He just shared some good news with me that I'm going to talk to him about as we get started in our conversation. But when he took the CEO role at this facility, he inherited an organization that was facing significant financial headwinds, mid-range safety and engagement scores. And in short order, he didn't just turn it around. He led his team to their best year ever recorded since 1907. Anthony is a PhD in leadership who also understands that clinical excellence is a byproduct of cultural health, which you know we love to talk about here on the Lead Up Podcast. Anthony, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast. So good to have you.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be with you, and thank you for the invitation to share some thoughts with you and with your listeners.
Yeah, this is going to be an exciting interview. You know, as you and I talked back a couple months ago, my goal in the Lead Up Podcast is to help healthcare leaders find the secrets, if you will, to creating cultures where people want to stay, to build talent attraction organizations, which we all know culture is a big driver of that, and then build a place where people feel valued, which in turn is going to help our customer, right? That patient feel safe when they come into the organization and get great health care in a trusted organization. So before we dive into that conversation, tell us a little bit about White Oak Medical Center, a little bit of your journey to here, and then we'll get into some of that good news that we want to talk about.
All right. So thank you, Mike. My career is divided into two even parts. About half of my career was in international development, looking over projects in about 120 countries around the world. Then 20 years ago, I moved into healthcare and started with Adventist Health West, later with Advent Health, and now with Adventist Healthcare, located out of Gaithersburg, Maryland. We're a small system, yet we have a lot of prominence in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, right around the district, with multiple hospitals, home health. I'm seeing as a system around 700,000 patients every year through
Wow.
our integrated healthcare system.
That's a lot of scope, a lot of work. Talk to me, like, how many employees do you have? How many physicians? Those types of things that you've got to try to keep happy every day, right?
Well, just focusing here on White Oak, we have a little over 800 physicians, and that's a mix between independent physicians and then employed physicians. Team members, there's about 1,500 who come here and make a difference every day as they extend God's care through the ministry of physical, mental, and spiritual healing. And we serve quite a region. Montgomery County has about 1.1 million inhabitants. And it is truly a privilege for our hospital to connect and be part of our community. And we say, as probably most hospitals say, we're just taking care of our neighbors. We want to keep them safe. We want them to leave here better than when they came in through our doors here at White Oak Medical Center.
Yeah, that's good. I want to talk about your leadership philosophy and journey a little bit, and then before we talk about the application of that in the organization that you took over. You've got a PhD in leadership from my understanding. You've studied a little bit of John Maxwell's work, which you and I discussed that. John has been a mentor of mine, literally my entire adult life. And you referenced scripture. You just mentioned God in your opening there, and how that impacts your walk as a leader as well. But let's look back at those academic days to leading White Oak through a tough market, and how you kind of reconcile this pop leadership, values-based leadership, or whatever it is, these theories that are raw, to kind of this values-based reality required to move your organization from letter grades of C and maybe worse to 6 consecutive safe A ratings in your safety, and then talk about that, what the good news that you just got that you shared with me while we were waiting to get started.
I'd be happy to. When I think of leadership, and I did take a PhD in leadership, a couple thoughts come to mind. The saying that leadership theory only matters if it survives Monday morning. Then the other thought, when I took my PhD, it gave me a tremendous theoretical framework. It gave me a language. Um, it opened up a lot of knowledge. I would say probably though my early on mistake was trying to sound smart instead of being useful,
Mm,
trying to be useful to the team around me, stopping to listen, to be present, to listen to that front line and the work that they're doing, um, and working on solving everyday problems. Theory is good and it can be helpful, those theoretical frameworks. More importantly, what I've found through my journey in operations is how do you operationalize the theoretical frameworks? And theory is one thing, but getting into operations and working with people, it's another thing. And it requires heavy investment to move an organization forward in people. It's probably we're the most focused at White Oak Medical Center on our people and growing them. As Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership.
mhm.
And if we're going to move to world class, we need leaders at all level who are developed and are ready to go out and work. And I don't think we can just contract out leadership. We have to develop it. Um, the Adventist Healthcare White Oak Medical Center way. And we've chosen to do that. And we've seen results. We moved from a very old facility that was losing probably $500,000 a month, came into this new facility, and it's about the time I arrived. And the team was really questioning, even though we're in a new hospital, can we make it? We were sitting at a C in safety, weren't really making money. Quality was average, patient experience was pretty low, and morale was low. We were at about the 45th percentile. Today, we look at as we've invested in people, and I know there's a lot to unpack in that statement. What does that mean? But today we sit at now, I can say our 7th A in Leapfrog. The spring grades are just coming out. We just received news from Health Grades, which measures all hospitals and many physicians across the nation based on outcome metrics. And so these outcome metrics are based on metrics that deal with quality and safety. This is not perception, it's reality. And we are ranked in the top 3 hospitals in safety in Maryland and in the top 10% in the nation. It shouldn't have come as a surprise, but we weren't notified. We actually read about it in the news, the local news. White Oak, among the safest hospitals in the nation. There's almost 5,000 acute care hospitals nationwide. And I think we're number 300. And that's just a palpable difference. And it's important to stop and celebrate those moments, to let the frontline team know they did it. They made it happen. Great nurses, doctors, radiology, those who go into the room and clean it, and makes that difference. And so we try to stop and celebrate those big wins. And this last year, there's just been one celebration after another, Mike. It has been
Oh, God.
really stopping to say thank you. And it's about consistency, hardwiring process. We have what we call the Adventist Healthcare Way. It's our standard management approach. And the standard management approach was recognized by Malcolm Baldrige as a best practice in the United States, what we do here at White Oak Medical Center. And so we have process maps. We know what's expected of us, and we know how to measure if we're meeting our goal in our department. All departments at our hospital have a main thing. often we take a shotgun approach. We're running around with our hair on fire saying, we got to get all this done. Well, we said, no, we have to stop that. Each department has a main thing. That's what they're focused on. That flows into an overall picture of how they fit in the organization. And there's a communication board that's right in the team room where the team members every morning and every evening at shift change are reminded about their main thing. And then we measure, are they meeting their main thing? There's 6 measures of success for each department. Those measures may be different depending on the department. And then if they're not meeting it, let's do a DMAIC and figure out how we improve and how we get better. And let's look at failures and learn from them. We don't celebrate failures, but we certainly want to celebrate the learning from those failures and really have psychological safety to admit, I made a big mistake. I failed. Here's what happened. And we are on that journey to really high reliability organization and psychological safety.
I love that. So much good stuff in there. You made reference to, theory is all great as long as it can survive Monday morning. It reminds me of the great philosopher Mike Tyson that I've studied. He said everybody's got a fight plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And and that's kind of what you're referencing. Theory's good. I got a plan as a leader, but okay, now what? Because Monday morning shows up, and we've got a problem that maybe we have to deal with. And you also said something about we can't outsource leadership. We've got to develop that, which I'm a big believer in, right? I and just my background 25 years ago, and even I started my business 20 years ago. March was 20 years, Anthony. But before that, I worked for a headhunting company, recruiting leaders like you, recruiting, and then I started my own business as a headhunting firm. We were recruiting leaders. I don't do that anymore, mainly because I didn't really feel like I was making deep impact into organizations. I was maybe bringing a body in, and I was making great money. I mean, you get paid. You've probably paid a recruiter fee before, but
Yeah.
get paid great money for that. But I didn't really feel like I was, having a deep impact in the organization, like I do now with developing leaders, helping companies develop leaders so that we can grow our own and they know our culture and our values better, and have more of a buy-in to that organization. So I love that philosophy. Let's dig into that a little bit more. You've been here 8 years now, I think, with the organization.
6
Um,
years. Have this help.
Okay, so what was it like from, when you started? Y'all have now had all of these great results. How long did it kind of take you to maybe start turning the culture from a culture of maybe average belief? A lot of that's belief. I'm a big
Mhm.
believer in we even before you got there, they knew what to do, right? But what did you do? What were some things that you practically did to start turning the mindset, shifting the culture, shifting the belief a little bit to move from clinical protocols to more of behaviors that we have to the behaviors that walk around in the hallway that really, implement those policies and processes.
Mhm. Mike, some things, and I'm not saying this is all the secret sauce, but as I look back on these 6 years, the first thing was to focus on the most inner circle, the president's council. So our C-suite plus HR and marketing leadership. And it was looking at how we would develop ourselves and model what we expected from our team. We set up some simple cadences of meeting every morning. This was kind of novel for the team. Let's meet every morning for 5 minutes and level set for the day. Let's meet once a week and work on tactics. And once a quarter, we'll go off site and really roll up our sleeves and work on long term strategy. It became very clear that there was a need to continue to grow then our leaders across White Oak Medical Center. So we established what we called the Leadership Institute. We worked on some gap analysis, very unique to us, Often you can sit in a C-suite and you can turn the wheel of the organization to the right. But if it's not connected to leaders, directors, managers, and supervisors, that steering wheel isn't strongly connected. You may go to the left. And so
Yeah.
we said, okay, we've got to be connected throughout. And what are those gaps? And often leaders, we take great clinical, high performing nurses, and all of a sudden they're a director. And where is the training on strong leadership? So we said we will form curriculum. And the curriculum was based on some of Kolb's theory of adult learning. We said, well, we're going to give some theory, but they have to go practice it. We need to give them real tools in a toolkit when they leave the session that they go out and use.
Mm.
And then we'll bring them back a month later and reflect on it. So as adults, we like talk about it, reflect on it, what worked, what didn't work, and share with each other. And we have a whole series for our directors, a second cohort series for managers. And as executives, we became the faculty. While we do bring some outside talent in, we said we need to be involved. And that's why I mentioned we just don't outsource leadership. We have to build it. And as executives, let's model it and teach it. And I think this starts to, and let's own our culture. And let's make some things non-negotiable. Often I'm asked about our mission statement, which is our North Star. We extend God's care through the ministry of physical, mental, and spiritual healing. That's powerful.
Mhm.
But I'll be asked, Anthony, I'm an atheist. Can I work at White Oak? Well, yes, you may, but there are values that are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. And if we can't live by them, we should look for another job immediately.
Mm.
And we call them our rises values. And they just can't be written on the wall. They need to be practiced in the hallway, non-negotiable. And we talk about rises values of respect. Let's respect each other. We have 60 nations that represented here at White Oak Medical Center, many
Wow.
languages, all religions. So let's respect and understand, as I think Kobe once said, before being understood. And then let's be people of integrity. That's a word that's not used much anymore, but let's
Mm.
be people of integrity. And then service, serving each other and serving our community. And then excellence. No one shows up in the morning, I don't think, to work and says, I just want to be mediocre today. No, they want to be great. So let's give them the tools so they can be great and bring us to world class and excellence. And then finally, stewardship.
Mm.
There are limited resources in our world and here in Maryland. And then because of our capitated contracts, it's just fixed revenue. We Every individual needs to really be a steward. They're all going to touch resources of the hospital, either through paper, they photocopies, paper, pens, some will manage payrolls. And so let's be good stewards. And those values are discussed and we hold each other accountable. And that begins to form culture. And then when they see leadership presence, we round incessantly. This morning, I was here at 4:30 in the morning, rounding on the night and spent about 3 hours rounding and visiting with team members, listening to them, hearing their concerns. Some, it was just, hey, yesterday my brother in law passed away.
Mm.
I'm really sad. Wow, to empathize with them, put your arm around them, pray with them. Team members will never forget that. So, from the CNO to the CFO, CMO, myself, we are out there day shift this weekend. The CMO and I will be in the hospital rounding with goodies to hand out to everybody.
Mm.
And they don't forget those things. Just having a
Right.
presence there builds culture. People say, wow, what I do is important. The senior leaders are here visiting with me. They're here to support me, not spying on me to catch me doing something bad, but catching them doing good things and thanking them for what they do to make us world class.
Yeah. So good. Love the values talk. I think I sent you a copy of my book, Quit Losing Talent. And
I love it either way. Your
thank
book
you.
is phenomenal.
Thank you. The first tactic is target check your values, right? And that's what you're talking about. If we don't get people on target, I mean, we can grow up in different environments. We can, have different educations, come from different parts of the world, be different ethnicities. But if we don't have that target, if we're not all focused on how I show up with integrity or how I respect someone else, then we're all over the place. That's kind of where I use that image of the target. We're all over the place. We're maybe outside even the target itself. And so I think that's vital. One of the in our work, the first thing we do is start working with organizations. What are your values? How do you how do you infuse those behaviors and that mindset through every person in the organization? So my question for you is y'all are talking about them. What happens when somebody misses the bullseye? Hey,
Mm.
Anthony, you need to show up and be respectful. Let's say somebody misses the bullseye. How does your organization handle that and kind of try to get somebody back towards center in that?
Mike, that's a great question. Let me back up a little bit. I all great organizations, one of the things they practice on this very point is let's hire right. Let's out of the gate hire people for attitude, people that demonstrate high levels of the values we're looking for,
Mhm.
so we know we're gonna stub our toe less.
Mm.
We hire right, and then orientation, we spend significant time right up front with a new team member. And I really insist on meeting with all of our new team members. That's quite a few.
Yeah.
Even though our turnover is low, you can imagine 18% of 1,500 team members. It's quite a few people, but we talk about the values, how they're really important. And now they're in the game. They're not Monday morning quarterbacking. They're in it, and we're in it to win it, and
Mm.
that these are non-negotiable. Then we do stub our toe. Eh, we want to have a we have what we call a just culture. In fact, we teach just culture 3 times a year, from the executives to front line. We're passionate about it. When we make mistakes, whether clinically or with our rises values, not respecting someone,
Mm.
um, we first of all, really wanna say, let's be just about it. We're not gonna put someone out the door. Um, we like to hold each other accountable, talk through how it happened. If it's not working well, get their leader involved to talk about it. And it just starts with a discussion and a recognition. Yeah, we stubbed our toe. We really weren't a good steward of these resources, or we didn't really respect the person next to me, and the comments that we made, they might have been somewhat degrading, and talk about what would it look like to be better. If that pattern though exists with somebody, that does escalate and not in a negative way. And
Mm.
eventually we would want to help that individual if it continues to find somewhere where they would feel more comfortable in their work and where we would feel more comfortable, otherwise outside the organization. If those rises values continually are violated, um, then we would wanna help them, um, move on. And
So
it's clear from day one, though, if we set clear expectations, clear parameters, and it will start with leadership from the top through to our directors. They have to model it, that consistency. If the team senses and sees a crack in the wall with leadership, that we're not respectful, that we don't have integrity, that's gonna be a problem. We will not change the culture. It will not move the needles. They have to see it in us and their leader. Um, so it's something we're focused on. If you walk the halls, you'll hear people talking often, "Oh, rises values. You missed our rises values." So there's even this mutual accountability amongst team members. Um, and we on purpose, this has been purposeful, intentional at White Oak. We do not print out and put our values on any walls. We it's taught, We say, we want you to memorize it. RISES is the acronym, and know it, and then practice it. And it's taught in our Leadership Institute. But it's just shouldn't be some trite words that are written on the wall. It needs to be practiced in the hallway. And when it's not, we have to call it out. And we have to do it.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you said it begins in the hiring process, right? I mean, our values, we don't only use our values when somebody misses the mark, we start with those, right? We hire to those values. Leaders have to model those in the hiring process and the onboarding process, and every in the teamwork process, all of those things. I love, you're speaking my language. I think it's so important, but not, you know, the reality is, Anthony, I love what you just said. We don't put them on the wall. A lot of organizations, they create these big strategies and vision and mission statement. They put them on the wall, but they don't really walk through the halls, right? And what
Yeah.
I believe that me as an outsider, I should be able to come into any organization and from the CEO to, an environmental services champion should be able to share with me what the values are and how those show up in the organization. And that's hard work with 1,500 employees, but we should strive to that goal, I believe, and it sounds like you guys are doing that.
It is. And one thing we practice, it's nothing new, but we talk about our 10-5 rule at 10 feet, you know, recognize someone in the hallway, nod, let them know you see them. Don't look down and look away. At 5 feet, you really need to say hello, good morning. And
Mhm.
I can tell you, I would say 90% of the time that's happening at White Oak Medical Center. It's so exciting to see the friendliness. People comment again and again in our comment cards through Press Ganey, the friendliness of the team. It has become fairly hardwired, that simple practice. And we talk a lot about, we are on stage. We know that what happens at home influences how we feel at work, and we're empathetic to that. But let's not just wear it on our sleeve. It's not our patients, our community shouldn't have to worry about those things. And so um, we really work to be on stage, not being fake. That won't work. People will read through that eventually. But
Sure.
really giving our best, our all, the best of ourselves to our community and to each other.
Yeah, that's good. Let's transition to another topic. How about removing excuses, right? You operate in an environment where your revenue's given to you, right, in a capitated market, and regardless of how many patients you see that year, those types of things, and many organizations, we live in an environment right now where obviously healthcare is highly regulated. Rural healthcare organizations across the country are struggling with the cuts made by the federal government. But regardless of that, you've added 50 beds. You've hit 15% EBITDA. How have you kind of driven this like opulent mindset where we can do more, we should do more, and really create this culture of growth and innovation when maybe external forces are against you a little bit? Talk about that.
Hmm. What I have found coming to Maryland, because I worked much of my career in a fee for service, whether California, Texas, or Florida, it was fee for service. So pay per click. You
Mm,
come here and we have the revenue constraint. And what I realized is revenue constraints don't limit innovation, they force it.
mm,
You don't force it, it may not happen. And so the things we've focused on are some of those key blocking areas, quality. It- At least Maryland rewards us for our quality. Fewer readmissions, um, fewer, let's say, bed sores that are acquired in the hospital, fewer falls, infections. And so moving those needles in quality to get to that A in safety and leapfrog, the health grade scores also moved our quality scores with the state to where we were in the reward that earned millions of dollars in additional funding. Our ED throughput, in fact, was mentioned in the state legislature. So we worked heavily on the emergency department throughput. Um, Even though Maryland has the recognition of the worst ER wait time in the nation, ours improved by 29%,
It's
uh,
incredible.
at the most improved ER in the state of Maryland. So looking at those avoidable admissions as well, really trying to focus on what matters, quality, and focusing on our team, and then the inefficiencies. I don't think we can cut our way to success ever. I've been in those. I've sat in that chair where I used to think, well, if we cut deep enough, we'll be okay. You will cut your way to closure.
Mm,
So we have to really look the other direction to how do we take away the inefficiencies, not cut, and quality. People will be attracted to a quality product
mm,
and it will pay dividends. And that adding, for example, the eighth floor was just incredible. Those we have added, as you say, over 50 beds. And since I've been here, and that's unusual in Maryland. And to increase the revenue at the rate we have increased it. I would say it comes down to also, I want to really give a plug for hiring the right people. We have the right skill set that works with our state and understands this extremely complex model
mm,
and has helped White Oak work through some of that complexity to maximize the model in the most efficient way. Whereas not having that team, we would probably leave a lot of money on the table unnecessarily.
I love that. Hiring an expert, right? Because you're not the expert. You don't have time to be the expert, but hiring an
Right.
expert on your team that can learn what needs to be learned to help feed that to you so you can strategically move the organization forward is important. So I love that you talk about that. It's not this is not all about what Anthony's done. It's about what his team has done and hiring the right
Yes.
people but Anthony's job is what I'm hearing is you're getting them focused on the right things and then freeing them up to execute in those areas. You want to speak into that a little bit?
It's so true. I think of either we can look at the cup half empty and say, well, there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied, no more revenue, or say it's half full and there's opportunity. And that opportunity will come from an amazing team, and finding the right talent. Again, well, I think it's Collins who talks about getting the right people on the bus and then getting them in the right seats. That is so true. We get the right people on the bus and then get those skill sets. We literally at Adventist Healthcare, I would like to name her, Katie Eckert. We have
Mm,
probably the state's leading expert on the model who has guided us through an extraordinarily complex model that my boss says the model is unknowable,
mm,
it's unmanageable, it's unequitable. It's it has gone completely out of control, and yet we have people who can figure out the unknowable, work in a collegial way with our state representatives, and find ways to maximize this very complex model. And then to motivate, there's a book talks about the power of moments.
mm,
How do we stop and create moments that are powerful and celebrate? Too often we just plow through to the next challenge. We have to stop and say, look at these mile markers. Let's celebrate them together. Together we did this. Look what we did. And it motivates people. And when also, I think from that person cleaning a toilet in a room to the person drawing blood, when they realize how they fit into the big picture, they're motivated. They're like, wow, look at what we're doing for our community. We're keeping people safe. It could be my mom and dad here in this hospital, and we're not going to harm them. We're going to get to zero harm every time, zero, and really take care of our community. And it's energizing when people when you start seeing the alignment throughout the whole organization. And I felt it, Mike, this morning. It really just almost broke me when I
mm,
walked went through the hospital and you felt the alignment. People were really energized. They were excited. They were talking about the right things. And just to see people who were, there was a group of nurses, just they were laughing when I came up and talking, and they didn't know I was coming down the hallway at 5 a.m. And I thought, wow, that's not normal. This is hard work. And these are real nurses that are in a hard job, one of the most highly regulated industries in the nation. And yet here they are with a smile on their face. They worked a long 12-hour shift
Mm,
and they're happy. It was exciting to see,
that's so
just
good.
contagious.
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk about how leadership impacts that because, one of the things we're really good about in healthcare is promoting from within. But the reality is we're training clinicians, we train a pharmacist, we train a nurse, we train a PT, and then we make them a leader. And there's a huge gap there oftentimes, right, in our technical operational skill to leading others. And how do you how have you found what's the secret to taking someone who does a great job and they're a valuable employee to us without giving them the keys to the castle, and saying go forth, but not really, developing them well. What's the actual hidden cost you've seen at, at White Oak when a brilliant clinician fails in that leadership role, and what do you guys do to kind of really get them future ready, make them a future ready leader?
I love the question. And you mentioned cost. I was reading some research recently that said at an executive level, when you lose an executive, it's a $2.7 million cost to the organization.
Mm,
So one thing we started here about 5 years ago was talking about let's grow a cohort of successors that can see how leadership's done before they just are placed in the chair. Here's the keys and good luck.
mm,
And so that program began people that we see as high performers who have potential for the future with no promises that they would get into leadership. In conjunction with that, we begin asking managers, directors, and executives, how much longer do you want to be in your job? And they have to write it down.
so good.
And where do you see yourself? What next job do you see? Then we sit down with them and say, okay, let's help you get to that next job. It may not be here, but we're going to stick with us. We'll get you there. And the power of that, I can tell you, I look at my CFO. In 4 years, he went from my CFO at White Oak to CFO of the corporation.
Mm,
That's a big win in my mind. I have two executives now who want to be president. And I tell them, stick with me and let's work on a development plan, stretch assignments.
so good.
I have an individual now who really wants to move out of her full profession into a very different profession. So I've paired her to chair with a clinical nurse to have some assignments across White Oak that are clinical and not just administrative, an executive coach, and then a 360 evaluation identifying the gaps. And so when we begin developing individuals, giving them the skills before they get in the seat, right from that successor program where they're not really a leader, but they're watching, they're learning, they're getting key skills to supervisory, to manager, um, director, VP. And I can tell you, we have long-term people here. My VP of our vice president of nursing, chief nursing officer, started here as a volunteer 32 years ago, became a frontline nurse supervisor, manager, director, and now 3 years ago, vice president. And she's amazing. And she hasn't missed a beat. But that pathway is important. And like you say, just putting a clinician into a leadership role without previous training and modeling of what we expect, it's really unfair to them and the organization.
Mm,
And there can be some big fails and big misses, and it can be very, very expensive. And what most of all may happen, we lose that person from leadership. They may fail so bad because we didn't invest in them in the right way at the right time that they say, I'm just going to go back and work on the floor and be a nurse.
yeah.
And then we all lose. They lose, we lose. our community loses.
Yeah, there's so many things, right? When the wrong leader's in, it's potentially morale, productivity, turnover issues that are caused there, and then like you said, maybe we lose them to another organization because they don't want to be a leader anymore, but they don't want to stay here because they don't want to work, back in the team that they were once leading. There's lots of things there that we need to think about, and it's the development program, these internal mentorship programs, right? Internal development programs for
Yes.
future ready leaders are so important. I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up. I think we could probably talk another 2 hours and not get to everything that I want to talk to, but you've done some amazing work in the area of well-being, especially for your physicians, right? And I think you mentioned on our pre-call winning an award for that. Talk about why, number one, why that's so important, and then maybe just quick answer some things that creatively y'all have done to help with that physician mental well-being, and how maybe that also applies to not just physicians but our overall staff.
Mike, thank you for the question. It is stunning to note that one physician every day commits suicide. 1 million Americans every year lose their physician to suicide, and 60% of all physicians are burned out in our nation. In this highly regulated industry, it has never been more difficult for physicians to practice and do their work. I had a good friend, Stu, who I worked with. He orthopedic surgeon, 46 years old. We played racquetball together in a past hospital. One day he drove under a bridge and shot himself. And I'll never forget that. And I said, under my watch, this will never happen again. And so when I arrived here to White Oak, I talked with our incredible chief medical officer, Dr. Jim Ross. He is one of a kind, extraordinarily talented, humble, smart, Duke graduate. And I said, Jim, we've got to get a physician well-being program going. And he said, Anthony, fine, but we need resources.
Mm.
And so I'm grateful to my boss who helped activate enough resources, some seed money to get going. And so some of the components, physicians need less friction in their work. And so it's partly listening to them, but what we did is we developed a physician-led steering physician well-being committee.
Mm.
So let physicians tell us, what do we need? Part of it is we have on call a physician coach and mentor if needed, and we'll pay for it. We have affinity groups, and it makes a difference. I see 30, 40 physicians going out and bowling together.
Mm.
Or sometimes there's affinity group, it's all women. You'll go out and they paint. They do have a painting coach, and they'll paint and eat together and just share what medicine means to them. Get back to that meaning of medicine. So there's the affinity groups, there's the coaching, there's listening to the advisory group. What do they need to remove the pebble out of their shoe, to
Mm.
remove the friction in the hospital? We measure pajama time. And if we see that going up, we're going to be in touch with them to say, how do we help? So you're not at home on your electronic medical record till 1 in the morning and then back in the hospital at 6 a.m. That's not sustainable. That's on a path to burnout.
Yeah.
So we have lowered the pajama time. And there has just been a plethora of initiatives. One thing we recently did, and we started doing with every discipline, all of our hospitalists, it was Hospitalist Day. We said, stop by at 5 p.m. at this restaurant near the hospital, pick up your dinner, and then go home. You don't need to stay and eat with the exec team. And we were all there. So they'd come in a hurry and say, oh, this is so cool. We can't stay. And we'd say, no, you don't have to. Please go home. And many would stay for 30, 40 minutes just to talk.
Mm.
And so just bringing physicians together, playing racquetball and doing other things, it's been a difference. So Medicus Integra, they give out multiple awards. Last year, I think we were the only hospital. They come in and look at, I think it's 10 criteria, 10 pillars, and we received the Medicus Integra award. Now, we're not perfect. We are not. and there's so much more work to do. The life of a physician is so regulated by the insurance companies and regulation. It's hard today to be a physician, and you're just on call, on stage in general 24/7. So
Mhm.
we feel passionate about it. We're going to continue to put money in our budget and from foundation money into this important initiative. I think we just have to put our money where our mouth is. If we believe in it, we've got to invest in it.
Yeah, so good. Thank you for sharing that because I know, every organization across the country is trying to figure that out, right? We need our physicians, we need our nurses, we need everybody. But there's a overwhelming sense of burnout and overwhelm right now, and it's just getting creative and in these different organizations to try to figure out how to at least reduce some of that. And I applaud you for doing that and making that a personal mission. So you don't hopefully lose someone there in your medical staff or your employee staff for sure. Anthony, thank you so much for what you're doing, who you are as a leader, what you stand for. Truly a values-based leader, which I love. And if we get that right, we get the culture right, we get the values piece right, all the other things take care of themselves, as you said earlier. We can't keep trying to cut ourselves to success. We've got to build a place that thrives with the values and the love and care for our own people, so they transfer that into the patient's side as well. I wish we had another hour or two to talk. I know you got to get back to work probably. Hopefully you'll get home a little early today. We're recording this on a Friday, and you were in early this morning. But thank you so much for what you do, what you stand for, and sharing just with the lead up audience today. Really appreciate you making time for us.